if you would introduce yourself.
All right, my name is Johnny Simpson.
And what kinds of making are you into?
I'm into all kinds of making, and over the course of my making career, I've done a lot of dabbling in electronics and like amateur electrical engineering, and I've relatively recently, in the past couple of years, gotten into 3D printing, and I'm just now starting to get into CNC laser cutting, and I'm also trying to figure out traditional woodworking here in this makerspace. And I've been pretty interested in 3D design and coding, and on the electrical engineering side, Raspberry Pi and Arduino have held a lot of interest for me.
And you said you were a transplant to this space?
Yes, I've relatively recently moved here to Savannah, Georgia, from the Austin, Texas area, where I was very fortunate to be a part of another makerspace there. And that was my kind of first introduction to really the idea of a larger maker community outside of my own garage, really. I didn't really understand that there was a thing called makerspaces, and then there's people calling themselves makers, and I really sort of felt like there was this club that I didn't realize that I should already be a part of. But in probably the past 2 or 3 years, I made that discovery, and I've been very enthusiastically making, I guess, out of the closet ever since then.
So, when you found out that there were people calling themselves makers, what kinds of people call themselves makers, and which kinds of people would you say are makers, even if they don't call themselves that?
I think anybody that is trying to figure out how to do a thing for themselves that they don't necessarily need to do for themselves, or they're interested in knowing how things work, that person is a maker. And I think that there's a tendency, obviously, not that everybody has, but anybody that's ever had the temptation to do a DIY project at home, anybody that's walked around for 2 hours in Home Depot trying to figure out how to do a thing just because they have it in their head, and the idea that they have in their head just won't leave them alone, that person is probably a maker. Folks that are tinkering and taking things apart, those folks are makers. Folks that are looking at something from a fan base that they already have enthusiasm for, and they're trying to figure out how to make something that looks like that, those folks are makers. So from folks that are tinkering with things like Raspberry Pi and Arduino, to folks that are trying to figure out how to make cool looking cosplay so they can go to Comic-Con, or they can go to other sorts of fan base conventions, to folks that are for the lack of better analogy, trying to make the better mousetrap that they think that they figured out, and they're trying to make a go of entrepreneurship. Those folks are definitely makers, and that is already a lot of words, but it's probably the tip of the iceberg towards really describing the entirety of the maker community.
And when you started dabbling with being a maker or interacting with the maker community, was there anything particularly that you were excited to learn, or that you were proud of having achieved while exploring the maker movement?
I was definitely excited to learn about CNC machines in general, both 3D printing and then also the world of CNC routers and CNC mills that I was lucky enough to have access to at my previous makerspace, and just the idea that you could take a digital model that somebody else had come up with or that you had come up with, and then make that turn into a thing right in front of you. Whether that was going from a block of material being reduced down by a CNC router, or literally starting from nothing other than plastic filament and having it built in front of you, and then getting to figure out exactly how that worked. That was the thing that I was very excited about. Enough that having access to a 3D printer at the makerspace was not really sufficient to satisfy my curiosity, and so I purchased a 3D printer kit that came as a box of parts, and if there was anything in that box of parts that could be disconnected from all of the other things, it was, and so I had the opportunity to do all of the assembly that was required in that thing, and it was kind of a labor of love, but after that I definitely felt like I had a much better appreciation for the way that 3D printers work. After that experience, I've had the opportunity to be the smart 3D printer guy in the room when a smart 3D printer guy is needed in a larger context in a makerspace. So it's definitely been cool.
And if somebody were interested in joining a space or becoming more of a maker in their own right, but were perhaps a little hesitant or worried about what they need to do to be able to get into the community, where would you recommend they start? What kinds of things do they need to?
I think going to their search engine of choice and just searching for makerspace in whatever community they live in, and seeing what's out there, and then the only thing you need to be I think equipped to do is to show up and introduce yourself and just start a conversation, and that the people that I've met in the process of coming and trying to do things that I already knew that I wanted to do, and the people that I've met in the process of attempting to figure out what it is that I want to be able to move on to doing when I'm not really sure. Those have all been social interactions with people that are very, very enthusiastic to share the passions that they have inside their heads, and it is definitely not an exclusive or a closed off community, even a little bit. It's a community of people that are more than willing to share what they know, and more than willing to answer questions, and more than willing to recruit people to come over to their side and be members of the treehouse. So yeah.
Is there anything else you would like the world to know about you, makers, or your makerspace in general?
I think I would just probably make the assertion that if you're watching this, you're very, very likely a maker, whether you know it or not, and that you owe it to yourself to look into the maker community if you don't already know very much about it, and I don't think that you'll be sorry that you tried.
All right. I thank you for your time.